Ew. I mean, I'm seeing a rather. Oh, the split screen is not a wide shot. That's fine. The bed is made.
I can see the bed down there, but not on the screen.
Okay. How about this?
Now you
Less
got book.
bed.
Yeah, now I can
Less
see your
bed,
book.
more book.
Yeah, more book, more intellectualism and less rest.
Right.
We're joined live this hour by Yahia. Oh my God, this man is incredible. This man you know he's got many accolades, many acclaims, many of which he is very shy and coy to speak of. He's known in many circles as the world's greatest living aphorisist, as a mystic poet in the tradition of Rumi. I mean, he's really a torchbearer for so many things. I will say because he will not. But I'm really excited to have you here, and we're just gonna have a conversation because even though we haven't talked, I mean, even though I haven't seen you in like over a decade or around
Is
a decade.
it that long? I remember it. I collapsed time and I remember doubling up and laughing with you like I haven't laughed in a decade. Honest to goodness.
8 years, I think.
That's insane.
Yeah, eight
That's
years.
insane.
Thinking about
Well, there you have it. Another illusion. Time.
it. Another illusion time, yes. But the minute I started typing you, I felt like we were there again. Yeah.
San
So
Francisco, I really appreciated that time in San Francisco. Um, you say it's 8 years ago. I'll defer to you, but it was. I don't know that I think I may have been once. I returned once after our time with the International Festival, and that was the highlight. That was what made San Francisco irresistible for me, and I've been very fond of it since. And if my wife gives me the green light, I would move there in a heartbeat.
yeah, I'm trying to figure this out now. I think it actually might have been 9 years. I think we were there in 2011 with San Francisco
Wow,
Bush Festival. So it's been 9 years.
wow, that's really incredible. That's really incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you keep
Um,
in touch? You keep in touch with the group?
you know, like you, I have a passing relationship with
Okay,
Antoine, and when I speak to him, it's always, it's always very like magical, and it's like
yeah,
the time collapses
okay, good.
back to our time there. But I got to tell you that, like, from my own experience, like that was, oh man, that time that. Okay, so for those who know, me, yeah, yeah, Antoine, like a number of other poets, some of them like really famous, living legends like Amiri Baraka and so many people from all over the world. We were gathered together by one Jack Hirschman for the 2011 San Francisco International Poetry Festival, and I remember that. I remember reading Amiri Baraka. I remember all these like these things that go on the resume, right? But the thing I remember most was
Uh,
that night that you and I liberated those bottles of wine from the
I,
bourgeoisie of San Francisco.
it was delirious. It was a delirious evening. It really was.
And that's like my first like memory of like poetry. Like my first like if I were to begin a biography of myself, I would
Mm.
probably start with that night. I would be like that was the night I knew I was a poet, or that was the night.
That is so interesting you say that, Matt, because I really, and I've told you this before, but I really remember thinking how fearless you are. So you were, whereas I fret about the thing and I don't sleep the night before, but you seemed like, I mean, I think you even stood during the breakfast. I mean, I just remember you sort of getting up, pronouncing furious, just, it was your stage. So that you say it's your first time is quite impressive. My screen went blank. I don't know why. Okay, we're back. I see
Yeah,
you.
me too.
Interesting. Interesting.
It wasn't my first time doing poetry. It was the first time I realized. It was the first time I really felt that I could like, or it was the first time it was like a legitimizing thing. I had done a few things. I had done enough things that Jack felt comfortable inviting me, right?
Right.
But I was
You were
it was
born. You felt born that day.
yes, I felt born that day, and it wasn't doing poetry. It wasn't impressing anybody. It was the delirious night with the three of us
Yeah.
walking down the San Francisco, having lost the rest of the guests or having lost the rest of the poets, and it was like we were the three poets still standing after again having liberated some bottles of wine
Yeah.
from
And I
from
get snatches. I get delicious flashbacks. I think we even didn't have money for a cab and bartered. I can't even remember the details, but I just remember doubling up and laughing till I couldn't breathe.
Yes, yes. And you know there are elements of the story that would be ungentlemanly. No, that's the wrong word. It'd be un
Untoward, perhaps.
untoward perhaps to reveal. But the night had everything. There was intrigue. There was
There was intrigue, sure. There was gentlemanly activities and ungentlemanly activities
and
transpiring every.
yes, and there was the gentleman's response of sublime indifference, which
Oh
is
yes, yeah.
which has stuck with me to this day. This phrase, sublime indifference. Man, that is why you are the world's. You are even on the spot. What an aphorism. So tell us, how did you come into aphorisms? How did you come into these just these beautiful distillations of the world? How did that become such a
I
one of yours?
I probably have a magpie mentality just to sort of break it down to basics. I like shiny things that are small and portable. And I grew up in a culture where people tend to speak in proverbs. There's very high illiteracy rate in Egypt, but that doesn't stop people from speaking in sayings. And it sort of passes on and it becomes almost like coral reef where the wisdom of the dead and the living layer upon layer. So I grew up listening to these marvelous sayings and I'd gather them. My grandmothers would speak and sing songy, witty, wise sayings. They had a saying for everything. Whatever it was that you wanted addressed, it would be like, well, as the saying goes, ta ta ti ta 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 tu. And so I would collect these things, and then at some point, as a young-ish man, I was reading Gibran, and Gibran led to Wilde, and Wilde led to Nietzsche, and Blake, and Kafka, and Pascal, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is it. This is what I want for myself. I had no idea that I fit into that equation, or that I could, attempt one myself. But I remember, I think it was Dorian Gray, let's say, at 16, that I swiped from a classroom I can't remember if I won it. I can't remember if I won it for a spelling bee or if I came in second and peeved. I swiped it. Something mean like that. Something petty. But I remember just being set alight by it, thinking, "Oh my goodness, how does he do that? How does he keep that up?" And I was scribbling in the margins, all sorts of responses. And at some point, I just peeled off everything that I'd scribbled in the margin. I realized I have a book of aphorisms here, and that was really how it came about. That's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It's so fascinating. You talk about a saying for everything, right? And I think that there's so many all the cultures of the world have such things. Like
Mm-hmm.
in my from my background, they call them dichos, which is these like, kind of like short little sayings
Yeah.
that always add up to like you really should have known better.
Yeah.
Or like that's what happens. Like that was.
But it's funny though, because I think, and I think that they're almost always said by people who shouldn't speak to people who can't hear. So it's like it's wasted on you at the time. You need to read it for yourself or write it for yourself for it to matter. Like
Yeah,
all experience.
yeah. Yeah, but I think in the hands of most people, certainly not in the hands of you, because you have such a generous spirit, but in the hands of most people, will the universal aphorism, the
Mm.
wide majority of them are essentially "I told you so." The most common application is the "and I told you so."
They're chastising. It's they have this wagging finger attached to the aphorism, and it beats you in the face.
So how have you? And I know your work, and your work does not beat anyone in the face. Your work is an
I hope
invitation.
not. I because I'm very aware of how deeply flawed the author is, and the gulf between what I'm saying and how I'm living. So I do realize that I need to hear them first. So I hope that one doesn't get that impression. But if they are occasionally admonishing, I assure you they're admonishing the author first.
Yes, yeah. Well, I assure you that the majority of what you write does not come as a wagging finger to the face, but rather as rays of sun beaming upon beaming upon one who's been um, forced into quarantine for many days, and
Oh man, the quarantine.
and the sun shines upon them.
Dentistry.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little about that because we are experiencing probably different. It's a tale of two quarantines here because I'm in California,
Mm.
where the mood is like this is messed up, this is whatever, but supposedly we're doing good and we're doing the right thing. So there's a weird kind of quarantine optimism, but it only comes in comparison to other quarantines, right? So, you, however, on the East Coast, what are you experiencing?
Well, Florida's funny. Florida's
You
sort
in
of.
Florida?
I'm in Florida. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh God!
Yeah. No,
So
no, no.
tell
I was in DC. I was in DC for
Okay.
years. I was in Silver Spring, Maryland for 5. I break up my time between Florida and DC when we were permitted to travel. Now we're largely Florida based. But what's it like in Florida? It's funny. We had that controversy with when to open the beaches, when to close the beaches. The spring breakers came. They did their thing. They brought the viruses back to their grandmas. We didn't shut down till they left. Um, I know there's some beaches that are opening up in Jacksonville, which is like 5 hours from where I'm in Fort Lauderdale. So we're still quarantine-ish. I mean, I know that people want to return, um, and people are returning. Actually, I look out my window and I see more activity, more cars. It's still kind of haunted. It looks like a ghost town. It really does. I mean, it still takes some getting used to. I went to the post office yesterday, and people have. This is not South Korea, so people make their own masks. So everyone looks like bandits in bandanas, and it's weird. I'm like, what is happening? What film is this?
Yeah.
But I think people are beginning to inch back to some semblance of normalcy. I think so. We're not, but some people are.
What film would you say that you feel like you're walking through?
A heist, or superheroes, or superheroes who are involved in a heist. Maybe I'm not sure, but it feels. I mean, it has me spooked, a little spooked, but at the same time, I'm aware of all the heroism and all the tenderness, but there's a bit of a disconnect because you've got those who aren't convinced, and so there's a bit of anger. They don't feel like it should be so. It's all been invented, and there is no virus. The virus is in your head,
Right.
and then there's right. I mean, there's that part, and then there's the others who are just terrified to smile at you because maybe if you have a gap tooth smile, then the virus will escape through the gap. I do have a gap, and you'll screw them for life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of jumpy. It's a funny situation.
I just
I'm trying to
imagine
remove my gap tooth.
like the Robin Williams Aladdin genie coming out of the gap of your teeth as a virus.
Yeah.
Da-da-da.
You're done. I got you. I got you. You thought you were safe. No, I mean, for a while, like I could see the stages even in our own building.
Mm,
Our pool was open, then our pool was shut. Then the elevator, they advised you to take only one person per elevator, which people didn't. Florida, they're elderly, they're outlaws, they don't abide by anything. So initially, you'd be in the elevator, and even there's a huge sign that says only one person per elevator, and they'd be like, "You don't mind, do you?" Or they'd give you a dirty look. So you were cowed by that, and then they got on board eventually, but not entirely, but eventually.
so you are surrounded by retired outlaws, aging Mad Maxes, libertarian octogenarians. Like how?
I I feel a bit like I feel like I'm a little bit of all of those people, so I can't judge them. I really do, especially the octogenarian part.
You do have it all. Um, I feel like the movie that comes to my mind sometimes when I look outside, and especially when I'm driving nearer to the city and the mass cityscapes is the movie 12 Monkeys.
Oh,
Um,
did I see that? Is that Morgan Freeman or Brad Pitt or
that's Brad Pitt, not
yeah,
Seven, not the one where they chop off heads, but the one with
last
Bruce Willis going back in time. It was based
kind of vaguely, yeah, vaguely.
right. So when in the future there's like the cityscapes and there's like polar bears walking around, or there and there's
Are
like
they? The
Yeah.
bears are walking around. I don't know if you've been reading this, but apparently the bears like to visit our galleries. Now that we've vacated the galleries, the bears are showing up in our galleries. Who knew that they were so civilized that they wanted to enter the art galleries?
Oh my God, can you imagine like bear cheeses and the bears are gonna liberate the wine, like
It's wild. I've seen, like, I can't remember what it was now, but there was some gallery where they had this installation with grass, like fake grass. And so the bears are there and they're pawing it. They want to see, they don't mind the sign that says "Don't touch the exhibit." Lions are sleeping in the streets. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe we should do this more often. Let the animals get out of their way. Let them get out to play a bit.
yeah, maybe we should like structure like world civilization in a way that we have a kind of
A week
yeah,
off or a month off a year.
a month off a year, because we already have summer where like kids don't go to school and a lot of things
Uh-huh.
like that. And we find our way around. So maybe we like give like a month and a half off for the animals to roam free. How are we gonna get them
Yeah.
to go back though? That's the real question.
When we show up, I think when we show up, they know that we're not safe to
Party's
be around.
over.
They're like, I'm done with this gallery. The humans are back with their analysis. Enough with the analysis. Just paw the painting.
Enough of their art criticism. It's terrifying. Gee.
Right. That's what kept them away.
Oh, the pretentious critique. It's like, oh man, it was suffocating.
What was it that Beckett had? I think the ultimate insult. I can't even remember if it was Endgame or critic. Once he said critic, that was it. There were no more. You couldn't stoop lower for an insult.
Everyone's a critic. All right. Yeah. Hi, is there any way you can share with us some poetry?
So I do have a new book here, a book that I'm launching under lockdown, and it's about revolutions, cultural, spiritual, and in between. I'm just gonna flash you a book cover here. It should belong here because there's a heart. And I'm gonna read you a fairly new poem and a short one, and it is about, well, it's called The Light Keepers. The Light Keepers. Hope is a lighthouse, or at least a lamppost. Someone must keep vigil to illumine this possibility. In the dark, a poet will climb narrow, unsteady stairs to gaze past crashing waves and sing us new horizons. Others, less far-sighted, might be deceived by the encroaching night, mistake the black for lasting, but not those entrusted with trimming wicks. Their tasks are more pressing, winding clockworks, replenishing oil. There is no time for despair when tending to the light. So I think that was me again speaking to myself, rallying in quarantine days, and not believing all the bad press, and and remembering that even amidst all of this, there was a chance to sing a joyful song somehow.
Yeah. Where are you finding joy these days? Because I still read so much joy in your face.
Well, you're very kind. Where am I finding joy these days? I'm starved for human contact, so I'm joyful to be talking to a joyful soul, and everything just counts so much more. Like when you don't get out and you just take a little walk, like my walk to the post office the other day, that was a joyful thing. Uh, just to get the sun on your face and interact with people behind glass, mind you, but still, and you're tempted to kind of just reach over and maybe just touch them just a little bit, but you are touching them. You are touching them conversationally, and they're telling you how
Yeah,
their
yeah,
day is going. And I think just basic interaction has become a little bit more charged with meaning and tenderness now because we're all in this together. I mean, when was the last time we were all in something like this together? I can't think of anything like that. I mean, short of a war, a world war, which is not quite so tender.
I
This
mean,
is a big,
we would all be in that together, but it would be a different dynamic.
right. I mean, we wouldn't be like feeling these warm, fuzzy feelings towards one another.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk a little bit. I want to ask you a little bit about the book. I mean, it's a really you sent me a copy to kind of like look at it to prepare for this conversation, And what I was struck was, I was struck by the content of the book. I was struck always by, by how much of you comes through, and all that you do. But I was also struck by just the layout of it. Can you
Uh,
talk a little bit about like how you kind of constructed this in your mind?
it's a funny sort of baggy grab bag kind of a book because it's got a bit of everything. And I realize, and I don't know if that's your experience too with your writing, because I know you write in different modes or genres, that one can't fully sort of unburden themselves in one form or another. So I used to divide myself, which is an unhealthy, unwholesome practice, and say the essays are my mind, they're because they're more sort of more cerebral. Although blogging is I think more watered down than that. But the aphorisms are my soul. They know more than I do, and I need to catch up with them. Poetry is my heart. It's messy, and I'm all over the place. But then you realize that you allow yourself to say certain things in forms that you don't allow yourself in another, or there's more bloodletting, there's more sense of relief. Conversations are free. Anything can happen in conversation. So in this book, it's basically realizing that I've not misrepresented myself, but maybe not entirely represented myself in any one book. There have been 7 before this, and there have been poems, and there have been essays, and they've been even one of conversations with Alex Stein. But I've never done it all together. And I think if you get to know somebody, you don't only get to know them in one mood. It's like you can't know a friend and say, "Oh yes, they're always proper and exacting." And no, I know them when they're under the table and when they're shaky and so I think with this book I allow myself to come across as I am entirely, in all forms. And I don't think I've done that in a book before.
Yeah. I want to talk to each of these things you've talked about. You've mentioned conversations,
Hmm.
you've mentioned essays, you've mentioned poetry, and you've mentioned aphorisms. I want to
Hmm.
begin with what you said about aphorisms being being your soul, being they know more than you do. They're things that catch up. Your soul is so like internal, right? But there's something also external about what you're saying because
Yeah.
they know more than you because you're part of a tradition, but
Mm.
you're also carrying forward a trajectory. Like
Mm.
you're like a link in a chain. You're part of something that came before you and something that will continue after you. That
Yeah.
you are and will continue after you because of the things you've done. Like
I,
I'm saying,
I like that. I like that. I like that. Yeah, you can't. I don't. One can't take credit for any of this stuff because yeah, there is the tradition, like I was saying earlier, where I come from a culture that speaks in aphorisms, and there is the time that I'm living in now, which I'm responding to. So even if I were to take, the ancient wisdom of the first aphoris and put it in today, it would have to be modified to address this time. So I am aware of aphorisms not existing in a vacuum that way. I struggle though with addressing the time in the aphorisms. It's a funny thing because if it has too much of a timestamp on it, I feel like I become a little uneasy with the aphorisms. Whereas in other forms, essays, definitely I can talk about what's happening now or this kind of thing.
yeah. But regardless, it's going to seep in. You know what I'm saying? Like
It does, yeah.
the moment will seep in. Like like even if it's like even if it's worded in a way,
The
like
wording matters. I do notice that since I've
yeah,
come to the States, the way I speak has changed, and that's because the way I listen has changed. So I do agree with you. It does. There's no way to prevent it from entering. I'm with you on that.
yeah, yeah. It's not like even I don't know. Like when I think about like the metaphor of like a river, right?
Mhm.
I can intellectually understand it and swear, but I come from Los Angeles where there are no rivers. There's the LA River, and that's
Yeah.
a very specific thing. I mean specific things because of the way it divides the city. So
Right.
that to me, like the river, it means the same essential things like train tracks, like the side of the track. So that's what a river means to me. But the river is flowing. The river is eternal. The river is like and surrender yourself to the river. None of that makes like deep heart sense to me. 'Cause I don't live around rivers. You say some stuff about the mountains, right? Like
Yeah.
the mountains in the distance, and the mountains as a reminder that your city life doesn't mean shit. You could be swallowed by
Yeah,
the ocean. That you need to
yeah,
reconnect. That is like, oh, I get that immediately, right? Because I
yeah.
live near mountains, right?
Mhm.
So there's
Yeah,
like that.
this is a fascinating subject, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I find myself thinking of this interview between Dana Goya and Kay Ryan. And Dana Goya was taking the position of being a poet of place, and he was talking about California. And Kay Ryan refused any of that because she was an out of place poet. She conceded the point that wherever you lived will color to a certain extent your lens, it will color your language. I mean, she was not being absolutely purist in that sense, but she was saying that even if she were transplanted or someone like her with her perception and her temperament and her peculiar gift were transplanted to another place that had, instead of rivers, let's say desert, or instead of, they would incorporate the scenery and the props would arrive in her poetry, but essentially who she was would be somehow transported intact. And that was so interesting for me, that conversation, because I didn't want to come down either way. And I'm hearing you. And so I'm reminded of that echo. Very
Yeah.
interesting subject.
Well, I mean, like, okay, we say all that, but like, I mean, like, and then we're just talking about mountains and rivers, right? But like, I could see a cactus, and not only will I feel something, I will feel a sense of cultural pride
Yeah.
attached to a
Yeah.
cactus, and it's a
I feel like that about deserts.
well, there you go. See, so you see
Yeah.
the desert, and then all of a sudden, now you're feeling a part of something much larger and bigger than you, and
Yeah.
it's some sand with like the sun. It's a plant with some prickly. It's a prickly plant,
Yeah.
but these things they take on meaning.
Yeah, there's a guy, I think his name is Hamdan, an Egyptian, I want to say a sociologist, who talks about the genius of place. And maybe every place demands poets to sort of sing its heart. And so maybe that's what we're doing, where we, the sensitive ones, the overly sensitive ones, the porous ones, are like, wait a second, I'm getting cactus juice here. I have to sing an ode to the cactus. Now the cactus is sending out its song to everyone, but it's the poet who's sensitive to the cactus song, and they carry it with them wherever they go, even when there are no cacti to sing of. So
Yeah.
perhaps there's something of that too.
I think, but there's also something like there's a tradition of meaning associated with certain things in the world. There's just
Mm.
objects and things that exist outside of us, and then we tap into these traditional meanings, and that becomes the kind of cultural component beyond just the mountain, the river, the whatever. I think that
I think that may be a big answer to my affinity for aphorisms. Is a cultural affinity somehow for it that I found queer echoes in Nietzsche and the German set. But yeah, I think you start with home, you wander from home, you return to home.
yeah. So, but when I say this, there's a trajectory, there's a tradition, there's a whatever, and when you're what you're describing with the aphorisms, it's not just that you're drawing from the past, that you're doing something current in the current that will
Mm,
one day be the past,
mm,
and that you're like
mm,
a link in this ongoing thing. So you're
mm.
drawing from these things that came before you, but it's almost like I don't want to say your responsibility because that's pretty heavy, but it's a life you've chosen, so it's your responsibility. You are the current
Uh,
that will keep it going. Like you're
uh,
like a link in a chain, or like a part of a wire that's like continuing this current that has to continue to pass
I
through it. So
love that.
as the
I,
future
I love
starts,
that. I prefer the water. I prefer the water to the chain. What's happening here? I'm blind. You must know that
see
I'm
this says
blind.
me right here, and then like there's you in the
Oh,
middle,
oh, I see. I see.
and then there's some question marks.
What will it lead to?
Yes, we don't know.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is, this is a compliment. I'm saying that you're like this. You're carrying on these traditions that live long before you and will live long after you, and and that's what you described to me when you described the aphorisms. Like it's your soul, it's smarter than you,
Mm,
it's bigger than you.
mm.
because it's part of something collective that's larger than any of us.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm aware that I can't take credit for and that I have to catch up with it because I too am sort of I'm sending something that's not entirely mine to beyond me too. So yeah, I think that's a useful and humbling and beautiful way of looking at it that I'll keep in mind.
Yeah. So let's get to your messy heart. Let's talk about poetry. What does that
Yeah.
mean? What does that mean that it's a mess? That your poetry is a
Well,
mess? What do you mean by that?
it's funny. I write poetry, but I don't fully identify as a poet because I think I mean I'm aware of far better poets, technically vaster spirits than myself. Um, Poetry is somehow I identify as a poet just because it's a sensibility thing. I do write poetry and I enjoy it, but I think it addresses more emotions, and not that all writing doesn't come from emotions, but I think it's more purely emotional, and maybe that's just my wariness of pure emotion. Maybe that's what I'm admitting to is that it's not poetry that I'm wary of. It's pure emotion, and that's what ends up coming through in its sort of unfiltered, messy way through poetry.
Yeah, emotions are messy. I mean, like so how do you so when you're sitting down, you're going to write a poem, right? You're composing. You're getting a series of words and you're putting those words in a series of orders. So you're trying to bring order to this chaos in your mind, right? If you're going to write, if
Yeah.
you're like that type of poetry, that emotional poetry, that one moment is it feels one way about a thing, and the next moment feels another way,
Mhm. You're at the
and
mercy of the unruly heart. You can't. Whereas with aphorisms, yes, they are rooted in personal experience, but they're vaster. They address maybe if they're lucky universal truths, or they can abstract that way, and you don't have to say I. You don't have to represent I. With poetry, you don't. You can't. You're confessing in code whether you like it or not. You may put on a brave face to the world or your partner or whom or yourself, but you sit down and you write the poem and the poem outs you. It's like, got you. It just tells it like it is, and sometimes you startle yourself because you think, oh, I didn't know I felt quite like that, but there you have it. The poem has spoken over your head and lets you know where you're at.
yeah, yeah. But then in the editing process, don't you find yourself in a position where you're trying to debate your own inconsistencies? No, no,
No,
you
the
didn't.
editor is not to be wholly trusted. First of all, because the editor's coming in, the editor is not always equal to the poet. He's the critic. The critic is someone who
Yeah,
is
yeah,
very well informed. He's a jeweler. He can appraise things, but he didn't create the gem. The gem was handed to him, and he pulled up his
right.
lens and brought in his experience, his great vast experience, his book learning. So, I mean, it also depends on the poem. I mean, I think some poems just come out ready made. No assistance required. They birth themselves. If you're really struggling with it, then maybe the editor can give you a hand in the birthing process. But
Yeah,
typically, no, I don't think there's too much editing that goes on. I like that you're
it's
moving.
it's yeah, yeah. I'm getting some coffee here. So, but the internal, it sounds to me like when you're writing the type of poetry you're writing, this confessional poetry, that the editor becomes something of like your internal press agent. Like, don't say that. No, 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 no. Like, you gotta present this in a way where yeah,
Oh,
put a
do you
happy ending
mean?
on
Do
that
you
one.
mean? Wait, sorry, Matt. Do you mean an editor that you submitted to, like in a magazine or a journal?
I mean your own internal editing of your
Oh
poetry.
no, right. That's what I thought. Yeah, because I didn't want to come across as so snooty that if an editor in a journal says something like,
How dare you?
you can't touch this, back off.
No, no, no. I meant your own editing
Yeah,
process. So your own internal editor
no,
becomes kind of like if you keep your editor, your editing process becomes like you become your own internal press agent. Like there's
yeah,
like, don't say that, don't tell them that, do
right,
this, end
right.
with a
That's
happy ending. Like
exactly
that's what they
it.
want to hear. Like they don't leave this unresolved. Like that kind of thing.
Right, because the poet is drunk, the editor is sober. There's an advantage. No, but seriously, there's an advantage to intoxication,
Whoa.
and there's an advantage to sobriety. The Persians, say that you think of something once drunk and once sober, or it's like sleep on it kind of thing.
Yeah,
And so the editor is going to be sober. They've slept on it. I want the sleep deprived, ecstatic lunatic and their vision as much as possible. As much as possible.
as much as possible. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so the editor, the essay. Tell us about the essay form and what is that to you to be straight jacketed by the demands
Um,
of logic.
Yeah, I mean the essays. It's funny. I don't think I'm writing. I mean, I know I'm not writing the way I was in Egypt. One, because I'm not in Egypt. I live the way that I was when I wrote my first book of essays. I have a wife. I have a life. I'm older, and I'm not a. I can't afford to dedicate that much time and intensity. I mean, it was just I could lock myself up. I would self quarantine. I've been preparing this quarantining for decades, and I could go without sleep for 3 days just to write and think things through. So I do think they're more diluted now, but there's still sort of mental exercises where you get a topic and then you send the brain with its octopus arms and to just go out there and bring everything to digest it and just make something that's more cerebral. So now I look at that stuff and I'm like, who cares? There's more ways to it than just that. I've lost the enchantment that I had previously with the mind. So that's why I'm more inclined to bring in other things like conversation, because that doesn't hold anything sacred. Conversation is the big, tongue out at everything that says, let's see how it happens now. Let's play seriously.
Yeah, yeah. So that brings to the conversation. What made what because this is not the first time you've made a collection of conversations. So I'm really interested in that. Like, how did you decide how did you decide which conversations to include and which conversations belonged in this collection?
Well, I had the first collection of conversations was with a fellow aphorist, poet, writer, genre by the name of Alex Stein, and we had bonded over aphorisms, but not only over just aphorisms. We'd read the same people and had the same reactions, and we're in conversation with them, and we found someone. We're like, oh, you're deformed like me. You have the same hunchback. Please let me feel it. And so we realized that we can have a conversation about our readings and how we become writers, and that book became The Artist is Mystic. And it was basically he and I. We never met till this day. Alex and I have not met. We'd get on the phone for, I don't know, 3 hours at a stretch, and just he would ask me these guiding questions, and we would talk, or primarily he would let me talk, and then he would take what I'd written, and he would give it wings. He would sort of, it wasn't a straight transcript. He would bring in his learning and his poetry and his response to these writers. And I realized, and I always felt this since I mentioned Oscar Wilde at the very beginning as a 16-year-old, that conversation in and of itself is an art. But how do you capture something in the air like that? How do so what do? You walk around with a butterfly net hoping to catch every butterfly that leaves your mouth or your interlocutor or your friend. And then there are some conversations that can be structured in such a way with deliberation and some sort of broad playpen where you can get in there and have a proper conversation, like a delirious conversation, and then realize that whatever you might have wanted to do in an essay or in a poem or in an aphorism is there in that conversation, and it has the added element of the surprise, because there's another party that's continually challenging you and steering it in another direction. And I mean, it's like the Socratic method. You go in there, you go up to Socrates Socrates the wise, thinking you know a great deal about something, and then you leave realizing you know nothing, and you learn something new along the way. So I realized over the years that I'd had some conversations that I thought were well worth preserving, especially after Alex's series. And that's why I took the butterfly net out and I thought, okay, here, okay, here, okay, here. But I mean, I've always admired conversations. It's just now I'm a little bit bolder about sharing my own.
Yes, yes. I think that we have a way of like looking at conversation. We're getting an echo. So I'm mute you when I start talking. We'll talk. Um, we have this way of looking at conversations that I think that like kind of minimize what they actually are, because the next thing I'm going to say sounds like I'm being flippant about this other word, but we have this thing we take very, very seriously, that we really truly believe in, that we ascribe as like essentially our essence, right? And that's our personality, right? But from what you're saying, well, the conclusion my mind is drawing, that these things that we call our personalities are no more, are just merely our conversational techniques, and like the things we have gone through life using these conversational techniques and the results of these conversations, and we ascribe those things to be our personalities. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, what is persona? It's the sound through a mask. So the mask becomes sort of your style, let's say. The same style that you would look for in a writer. You want a writer with a voice, with a particular style. But then this idea, you're not faking it, or at least you're what you're presenting, if it's deliberate and mindful, is, I mean, who's to say that art has to be at your desk alone on paper or on a screen? Art, there's the art of living. You see that more, for example, in the spiritual realm, where people become their own works of art. They become their own masterpieces. So if someone in breathing, in walking, in interacting is able to live artfully, then why can't someone, as an artist or a thinker, speak artfully? Not artfully in the sense of artfully dodging anything, but on the contrary, in a way that is illuminating and entertaining and making connections. Also, we do make connections when we speak to other people. We make connections that we can't do by ourselves. So I think there's something about the idea of entering a conversation. I mean, I thought of reading as entering a conversation as a kid. I would think you're entering a conversation with a great mind. Come prepared. You can't just sit with a great book and kind of slouch mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You have to be upright. You have to bring your best game. So if that's the case between the book covers, then why can't we approach another human being, another exciting, warm soul with their own universe, with that kind of attention and produce work that is art? So yeah, I do view it, if it's taken seriously, but not seriously in a pretentious, dull way. Just you enter it mindfully.
Yeah.
Mindfully is overused. Present. Just be present. Bring everything you got. Your whole toolkit.
Your whole toolkit, yeah. There we go. The echo's gone. Oh, it's back. But let me stand back a little bit. But I really, I don't want to mute you. Technical difficulties, but I don't want to mute you. I don't want to be talking and mute you then talk. So that as we talk about the beauty of conversations, have this weird like thing going back and forth. So we'll just deal with the echo. I love this though, because I think about being a child, right? Or a child is born, not just me, but anyone. As a child is born, and they see a series of adults, and they see the way those adults move through the world, right? So unless we're talking about like a physical confrontation, or we're talking about someone having money or this or that, just the way that they see what we call personality types. Those personality types are just what people choose to do in conversations. Am I going to use humor? Am I going to strong arm my way through this? Am I going to concede? Am I going to be tricky? Am I going to like do something where it's like, oh yeah, I agree, and then like I'm going to trick you, and I'm gonna like pull you into something and be dishonest and deceptive and et cetera, et cetera? Am I going to be straightforward? Am I going to, I mean, like all these kinds of just different methods and ways of going about moving through the world, right? We see those as children, and we pick up traits. But those traits are really how to manage yourself within the context of living with other people. And the most basic interaction we have with other people are conversations. You know, there's something
There's a
big.
part of me that wants that is I don't know if it does echo a little bit, so I don't know if I should jump in now or jump in.
Yeah, Ben, I'm
Okay,
quiet now.
there's a part of me that feels like what you've described is short of real conversation, or at least what I'm referring to as real conversation. That kind of a personality would be a limitation, would be scaffolding, would be like, oh, like the way a father presents themselves to their children, for example. Your father has to be respected. He's always serious. Don't smile too much. Don't speak unless you have something meaningful to say. And you can't see him the way his friends see him, or the way his wife sees him, or God forbid, the way his mistress sees him. Those are all different presentations of the self. But I'm talking about a conversation where you do away with all that. Like we were talking earlier about our delirious time in San Francisco. Sometimes booze helps, but booze is, you should be able to do booze without the booze. That's why I'm wary of psychedelics. Like psychedelics are good, but there's no shortcut to transcendence. You can just get a glimpse of it. You should be able to do that for yourself, by yourself. So a good conversation, a real conversation, would be without personality. It's where you get to a point where you don't really care about how you're presenting yourself or how the other person views you. You kind of have unzipped and stripped, bare to the whatever, to the soul, to the essence, to whatever it is that you are, and you just let the ideas play, or you let whatever it is, you let the conversation have its way, and you get out of its way. And there are conversations that are had, generationally, and there are conversations that are had, you know, you can be having a conversation larger than yourself, certainly. So you're not so concerned about your personality. You're being spoken through. What is this beautiful line, Rimbaud's line about how it says, one should not say I think, I is another, too bad for the wood that finds itself a violin. You're A good conversation is when the violin gets to play and the wood just is incidental,
Yeah.
is out of the way.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying right now. But what I meant to say is what I was describing is not the world as it should be, but the world as it currently is.
Of
Because this is
course.
what we do.
Yeah.
We pick up on certain traits and we see what we think is going to be effective to quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote get your way in life, and then we go about doing them.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is transcending that thing. But what I'm saying is that this question of the conversation is much bigger than we realize. It is damn near the totality of how we move through life with each other, how we jockey for social position, how we
Yeah.
go through all these things, and the methods and techniques we choose to employ in said pursuit.
Mm.
And you're talking about
Meaning
abandoning that,
caring
and
less. Yeah,
yeah,
caring less about that. Professionally, you don't want to. I mean, you don't want to lose your job unless you want to lose your job. If you
right,
want to lose your job, practice abandon, practice, radical honesty. But what happens is you whittle away all that is stifling and false, because of necessity you're going to lose people who were previously interested in your carefully constructed
manicured.
self, and suddenly you realize, oh, my wild abandon is off-putting to X, Y, and Z. Well, fine, you still have A, B, and C, or just A. You know.
Yeah, no, I just it's fascinating me though, like just like how much like what you said has unlocked the door to my mind of just how really central this question of conversation and the choices we make inside conversations define not just define who we are. I mean, who we are outside of like our hand, the length of our fingers and
Right.
the capacity of our eyes. Like the
Well,
way.
Socrates again. Speak, so I see who you are.
Mhm.
No, I was just jumping in with a Socrates quote about basically speak so I see who you are. Just once you open your mouth, people get an idea, and then because we are eager to please and want acceptance and love and respect and all that other jazz, we modulate to the person that we're speaking to. But what if we didn't? What if we remained kind and loving and respectful, but cared less? I think that's a function of getting older also. As you get
Yeah.
older, without being belligerent, you don't want to be a cranky, nasty person, but
Yeah.
you can care less about what the other person is so that you don't do violence to yourself.
Right, right. So you are now in Florida, where there are a lot of older people who say what they mean. What is that experience like, as opposed to being like surrounded by? Because I know you're also a professor, so you're surrounded by people who need to maintain their jobs, need to like kind of do all the things we were talking about earlier. But now you're surrounded by people who don't. So can you contrast those experiences?
I find it refreshing, Matt. I really do. I've always gotten along much better, even as a kid, with people who are far older than me and people who are far younger than me.
Mm.
And maybe that's because I felt sort of imprisoned by whatever my age group expected of me. I don't know, but I've like as a kid I would hang out with the elders because they were much more interesting. I would prefer to spend the night, talking with my parents, really old, like 70, 80, whatever, philosopher, artists, or just grandparents or elders, wherever, because I felt they knew more about life. Now I'm very interested in young people, and I not in a perverse way, but just because they have an entirely different perspective,
Yeah.
and it's just fresh and different. So how do I feel? I'm perfectly comfortable with octogenarians.
Yeah.
I, it's easier to be around them in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's fascinating because of the freedom and this this, all that you generate through your work and through your conversations and just through your just general just how you are. It has me now thinking. I mean, it's interesting the conversation going away. It now has me thinking about the constraints because
Right.
it's
And
so
then
it
you
stands
say, yeah.
sharp. It stands in such sharp contrast that you're making me realize for the first time how constrained. I always knew things were constrained, but like the scope of it, right? Because I'm thinking when I'm listening to you talk about these conversations, I'm thinking that all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
Yeah.
That they have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time can play many parts. So I'm thinking about this like kind of Shakespearean tragedy about the fact that I don't say what I mean all the time, and I'm constructed by constrained by this.
But
Um,
isn't it funny? I see you as quite the opposite. I mean,
okay.
I am frankly uncomfortable with this sort of type of a format, and I've never done it before. And I don't. I mean, I felt like I could do this with you because I see you as just completely unencumbered by social restraints, like a beast in the most refreshing way. In the
Yeah.
most refreshing way, like just someone who's true and free and doesn't care. And because you're true and free and you don't care, then I can be next to you, true and free and not caring. Whereas if it was very sort of like this and then I would in turn I would be uncomfortable. But I don't see you
Yeah.
that way. But you're saying you're even truer and freer and beastlier than you let on. You know?
What I'm saying is, well, like each man plays his part, right? And I'm the rebel. That's my part. Like my part is to be the bad boy. My part is to
Mm.
be the flying the Molotov, like da 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 da. But and so like I know that I know how to do it. I know the rhythms of it. I know the whatever. And I bring my own spark to it, my own imagination to it. And I'm not totally constrained. I like like I
You
can see
can
the
switch
parts and how
roles.
they,
You can switch roles.
yeah. But I can see the parts and how they interact, and therefore I can move them around and be playful with them, right?
Uh
I mean,
huh.
and that's when you know that you understand something, you can be playful with it. When you're not
Yeah.
constrained by it.
Absolutely.
When it's not like that's when you know that the Lego collection is yours. You know these Legos and you know the different things they can do, you know, as
I
opposed to like
like.
you're learning the Legos.
Yeah. I really like this line about you understand something when you can play with it. And I think that's why, like, I remember as a kid I'd go to the circus a lot and I loved the idea of juggling, just juggling, because they were
Yeah.
so good at it that they could make it look so easy and fall down and still catch the ball or the plate. And I think that's why in writing, I look for the same things in writing that I do in non-writing in people. And this is the idea of playfulness. If you can play, then I trust you, because that means that you're not hiding anything. It's
Yeah.
you know what you know, and you're playing with it, and it's all out there. It's when there are so many constructs that you think, wait a minute, this is not natural. There's something kept from me. Maybe they just don't know, or they're pretending and making me pretend in turn.
Yeah. But there's a virtue to not knowing. For instance, right? We had a poets dinner gala or something like that. It was structured to be like the event that
Mm.
we would have this, and it was in honor of all we accomplished and whatever. And Jack leans over to me and says, "Do that poem," right? And so I get up and I start reciting this poem, busting around tables and doing all that. Had I known the collective resume of everyone in that room,
Yeah,
I would never have done that. And had I not been drunk too, but I would never have
yeah,
done that. But it was because I didn't know. I
yeah.
didn't know. I didn't know you can't do that. I didn't know that was
Right.
ridiculous. I know that guy over there who won like the German award for such and such and such, and the Swiss poet laureate of some major
Yeah.
city in their country, or I didn't know the world's greatest living aphorism. I didn't. I'm just like
There's
like
freedom. That's the freedom of it. That's I
yeah
think Kierkegaard has a thing about children playing with pebbles on the beach. And in this parable, they find those pebbles on the beach, those glistening pebbles that are sort of with the ocean washing over them, just as marvelous and just as priceless as you and I, or someone in the know, maybe you and I, would look at a precious stone and say, this is a good diamond. So for the kid who doesn't know the resumes, who doesn't know the authentic from the inauthentic, there's a freedom that way. I completely agree with you. Yeah, I see that.
yeah. And so that was there's definitely a virtue in not knowing the things you cannot do, because then you do them.
Yeah,
You just go out and do them.
yeah.
I want to get back to the book. It's a wonderful collection you put together. I thank you for allowing me to imbibe it, and to take
No
it in.
problem. Yeah.
I'm looking to return to it for its many treasures, on many an occasion. Can you tell the audience a little bit about more when it's coming out, where they can connect to some of your other work?
It's actually out now. It's been I think within the month it's been out. So it's not something like this because I've gotten to do, for example, a reading for Bridgewater Festival, or my old school asked me, or something for poets and artists responding to the pandemic. That becomes the book launch in the age of Corona. Zoom and Facebook and all of that become the way to seed these ideas. It's out now, and I'm happy. I think there's a Kindle out now. I'm pretty sure there's a Kindle out now, and that means that yeah, I'm happy to read from it when there are chances, and I'm happy that people will be visiting it. I think if whoever reads this may find it easier to approach previous books, because it's like I said, it's all there. There's a bit of everything for everyone. I realize some people are put off by poetry, for example. Those same people will not be put off by a conversation, because it's likely they've heard one or had one themselves. So that's the advantage of having it all there.
Yeah. What I meant to ask is where can it be purchased? Where can it be imbibed? Where can people connect to
Yeah,
that, as well
it
as previous works?
sure. It is available from my publishers directly. My publishers are Whip and Stock. It's on their site, but it's also available on Amazon, if people are not averse to that, and I guess just online. I should know more, but that's the extent of it. That's the people I've heard from have either gotten it from Amazon or from the publishers directly. It's actually the second time that I publish with Stock. I always publisher hop in the past, but this is the second time I go with them, and I feel like I may have found a safe home with them. They're thoughtful people. They're they're spiritual. They're just interesting people. They publish on a wide range of books from philosophy to poetry to spirituality. I have a book with them previously called Barely There, which is a book of really short poems. They're sort of if poems were to mate with aphorisms, that those would be the offspring. So
Yeah,
they're kind of for the age of Twitter, really. I didn't even realize I was writing for Twitter. This is again how you say the times seep into your psyche and your writing. And I realized, at some point, NPR was putting out a couple of competitions, for Twitter poems, and they had me on a couple of times, and I realized that I was beginning to cater to that audience. I was like, oh, I can do that. I can tighten the poem up a little bit, and so that book was a result of that. And there's been a book of essays called Trial by Ink, which was with University of Illinois. There have been a few poetry books. Balancing Acts was kind of the big one because it had all of my poems. So that's the only one that I'll recommend for now. And what
okay.
else is there? Am I forgetting
Um,
anything? Yeah. Oh, two aphorism books, of course. Signpost Elsewhere and am I blanking? Where Epics Fail, out of Unbound.
right? Where
Where
Epic
Epics
Fail
Fail
was
was
that one
one
of kind of
before.
the yeah, yeah. So I yeah, so like, this was my like neat way of tidying up the conversation and closing it out and being a control freak about these things. But as we have expressed in this, conversations have a life of their own. So now I'm interested in another question, right? Like
Shoot.
and that question is this: like, how do you know you're happy with the publisher? I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. Like, how do you know like this is right? Like, what clicks in your mind? This is right.
As far as a book,
As far as like, because you said I like this publisher and I think I found a home like from here on out.
oh,
What
it's like
inspires that feeling?
well, I like I said, I've bounced around from one to the next. I guess part of it was ambition or greed. You wanted to make a bigger hit, bigger publisher, bigger this, bigger that, and then at some point, okay, liken it to dating. When one was single and wolfing around, thinking, oh, I could do better, I could do better, I could do better, and then you're like, oh, but there's this girl that's always been there waiting for me, and she may not be as inflatable as the other one, but she's true, and she feels right in the sense of I can breathe her air more easily, and she gets me without my having to explain myself too much,
Yeah,
and so it's kind of like that. I think with publishing too, is that you find a home of sympathetic minded types, and not to the point of being mirror copies of you, because that's no help either, but they're facing the same general direction, they have the same values, the same concerns, and they put out stuff that you are interested in, genuinely interested in,
right.
and I think they feel like that to me at this stage of my life. This Whitf and Sock does.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm with this Flower Song books now. They published my second collection here,
What's the
and
name of the publisher again?
Flower Song
Okay,
Press. And I
nice.
kind of feel as though this is kind of where I want to stay just for the entirety of my publishing career. I mean, I don't want to go anywhere. It's like, and the reason I feel that is because I'm prioritized
Mm.
and I have creative control. And like I also feel like they do enough. I mean, or they push really hard. Or they push as hard as can be pushed. And so I want to grow with the press. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I don't want to like, okay, I got a bunch of attention for this book and now I'm gonna like dip off to some other, to the next tier, then the next tier, then the next tier. Then
Yeah.
I was like, no, I want to grow with this press to make this press the next tier, next tier, next tier, next tier.
Mm.
Like if that's happened or if not, just like whatever. But like I don't want to be in a situation where people are telling me what to do or how to do it. And for me, like this is like it's good. I get the copies of the book. The level of competence is
Mm.
high, and that's it. I mean, they're competent and they let me do what I want. And I like the
That's
publisher
that's
person.
very
I'm a
important.
friend, but like that's it. That's all I need. I don't want to be in a
Yeah.
situation where, yeah, you got this giant machine, but like you want me to change things. Yeah, you got this giant machine, but your giant machine is like, you're like at a sporting event, you're firing out T-shirts and it's never my shirt. You know, like, I don't be involved in that. So
Well,
I'm very,
yeah, you know what you want. Like you said, you want the creative control and you want the support, and you're finding it there. Now that may change. In 10 years, you may feel differently. You may find something else. But for now, for this relationship, you're ready to commit because you found what you want. And I think it's funny how even publishers are relationships that way because they are.
yeah,
They are.
yeah, yeah. So that's so I was curious to hear like what it was you found in this publication, if it was similar to what I'm experiencing right now. If there was like a kind of a like, yes, I have the ability to say what I want. I'm supported, and that's all I want,
Yeah, I
really.
think really to go back to the relationship thing, they have to get you.
Yeah,
Not because they want to sell you or because they just have to get you. Like you have to feel like, oh yeah, they get it. They get it, and they'll do good by me, and I'll do good by them if because this is a good place to be, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like you're in a really great place to be, even if it is Florida. So,
Listen, if you're ever here, you have a place to stay. We're 5 minutes away from the beach. It's a cool place. I mean, it's Florida is good for the body for sure.
yeah,
I used to go up to DC more frequently to get more mental, cultural stimulation. But Florida's a good place to kind of just breathe and quarantine if you have to.
don't go to any of the wrestling matches, as tempting as it might be, as
No,
they bump it back up.
I only wrestle at home. That's it.
Stay safe, my friend. This has been a beautiful hour. I really, really
You too.
appreciate you.
You too. Thank you. I really enjoyed that, man. Thank you very
We'll
much.
put the links below to all your work.
Cool. And keep up. I admire your breath. I can't believe how many conversations you have had. Like I will go and look on Facebook. I'm like, he's doing another one. How on earth? Where does he find all that creative juice? I admire your breath to interact and connect with so many souls. That takes a lot.
Thank you.